everybody for coming, for being interested. So this presentation is called More Than Words, the Impact of Speech Language Pathologists. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Lucy. I'm the graduate program director. Our program it's for folks who are going to be speech language pathologists. Admittedly, it's called Communication Sciences and Disorders. So it's why if you're searching SLP, it may not like immediately be obvious that that's there, but that is us. And also have our graduate program advisor here. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Christy Hasagawa. Like she said, I'm the graduate advisor here for the program. So I assist a lot with our admissions application process as well as with our current students who are enrolled in the program. So very happy to have all of you here today.
Okay, so with that, figure that right off the bat, there's probably at least a few things you all want to know. We never want to assume that everybody is totally up on what we're even talking about for speech language pathology. Most folks, if I tell them, run into somebody on the street and say I'm a speech language pathologist, that means nothing to them. Um, but with that in mind, y'all might be more aware. What do speech language pathologists, SLP is usually how it's shortened. I'm generally putting it in full in the slides, but just noting SLPs, who are they? What do they do? So we fundamentally focus on communication and swallowing, which is huge. And our name doesn't even necessarily include swallowing thrown in there, but feeding and swallowing is part of it. If we're really breaking it all apart, that includes how we make sounds, how sounds are actually produced, how understandable, intelligible folks are. That means how people understand others. So thinking about comprehension and how folks express themselves, the vocabulary they use, the grammar they use, the sentence structure they use, all of those major pieces. It also includes reading and writing. So we have a major hand in topics of literacy as well. How we interact with others. So great, we have all these sounds, we have all this language, but it's also critically important how we actually use it functionally in a day-to-day situation. How our voices sound or how our voices feel, whether they feel like hoarse or breathy, raspy, talking about the pitch of sound, the loudness of our voice, if those types of things are a concern. How our speech flows. Does our speech flow in a relatively smooth, uninterrupted way? Or maybe are there some disruptions like stuttering, repeating sounds, things like that? How our minds work. So again, our name really doesn't include the fact that there's this major cognitive component, but we absolutely work with folks about on things like memory skills, on attention skills, planning, problem solving, critical thinking, and things like that as well. How we eat and drink. So again, we absolutely have that feeding and swallowing component and how folks are able to eat and drink safely, get the nutrition that they need. And with that, of course, there's always how all of these things impact people's lives. So we are always looking at these things not just on their own as skills that we might be working on or areas that we can provide folks with strategies to help them out their day-to-day life, but also what does that actually mean for them? So we have a couple videos. They're not super long where, one is about 2 minutes, one is about 3 minutes. But I'm going to show the first one now. I think, in my opinion, these just give such a great sense of what speech language pathologists do, where I could tell you all day, and it's just not the same. So with that, this is a video. It's about speech language pathologists helping children with autism to communicate. So start that one and I'll put on captions. Um, right.
When we think about interaction and communication, for a little kid, play is huge. It's at the center of that. And we want kids to be able to play independently and with their parents and with their peers. The thing that I love most about working with kids on the spectrum is they have just the most unique perspective on the world. And they're smart and funny and creative and empathetic. I think oftentimes we don't think of them as being empathetic. Go to sleep. So one of the things that I get to do every day with play is get down on the floor with them and follow their lead with it. The reason that we watch what kids do and then do what those kids do is that they are going to be so much more motivated to interact with us and communicate with us if we're on their playing field. Play is also so important in terms of cognitive development and also in terms of expanding interests in things.
More ice cream.
So communication doesn't always mean speech. It doesn't always mean verbal language. Communication can look so different for different kids, and what we're trying to figure out is how can we get this kid to let you know what he wants and what he needs, and how can we get you talking about the same thing so that you're having a conversation.
Oh, it's empty. It's empty.
One thing that makes me so excited about going to work every day is the chance to be having a therapy session with a family, and perhaps that family didn't think their child would ever communicate with them. And then it's like a whole world of possibilities opens up for that family.
One more.
We want to respect and value this idea of neurodiversity, that brains think differently, and that's okay, and we need to meet people where they are and discover the way that they think, and then help them do the things that they're maybe having trouble with. Starting with the child's perspective and what the child wants is really just it's the foundation of everything we do. It motivates them, it helps them engage with us, and it helps them feel valued.
2, 3.
So I'll kind of pause. I'll stop our video there. But I love that video. I transparently share like this video and the other one that I'll show you in when I've done undergrad classes and teaching like intro to communication sciences and disorders. Really find it very, very valuable. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into what at least the day-to-day can look like. I say can because our field is also huge. Already mentioned, just let me, there we go. How many things that we do, but also like where do we work? So one setting that we might work in is private practices. And I'd say that's probably that seems to align with the setting that we just saw, a private clinic that somebody, owns, operates. But folks can also work in hospitals. The other video I have is going to be a little bit more of a glimpse into that standpoint. So there's very much a medical role for speech language pathologists as well, if that is preferred. Schools is probably where I'd say most people, if they're at all aware of speech language therapy and speech language pathology, schools are often the thing that come to mind. But that we're absolutely in those settings. Colleges and universities, there's folks like myself who I'm a speech language therapist. I And yes, graduate program director, but I teach, I provide clinical supervision to some of our graduate students. There's so many people here, whether their role is teaching, clinical supervision of students who will one day be speech language therapists, research, and all kinds of combinations of those things. So a world of options there. I think a lot of times folks also, even if they're thinking of hospitals, they're not thinking about other kinds of health settings. So rehab centers for folks who have potentially just experienced a brain injury, a stroke, and are maybe they're not in the hospital anymore, but they're still not ready to go home. And they're still maybe in the somewhat early stages of recovery. And so speech language pathologists are absolutely in those settings, often providing really intensive services for those folks, again, in the, not immediate, they've just come to the hospital, but pretty immediate time that they're after their injury or the neurological event. And even more broader than that, folks who work in more long-term residential healthcare facilities for folks with, working on like memory care units and things like that. If you're aware of skilled nursing facilities, speech language therapists have a gigantic presence there for memory, for language, for feeding and swallowing is so critical. And truly so many more places. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's all kinds of unique settings that we can even talk about further. With that, who do we help? So I definitely already talked about this in terms of the types of skills or the types of abilities we help with, but I think even the who is an interesting question. We work with people of all ages, from birth, from infancy. There are speech language therapists who work in NICU settings, particularly a lot of times on feeding and swallowing with, infants, preemies. And we also work with folks all the way up through end of life, whether related to again, dementia, progressive conditions, working with folks who have amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or ALS, things like that, that there's this whole magical spectrum. Even if you're not medical, I have a client and he stutters and he is in his late 60s. He's retired. He's coming to therapy. And then I've got like a 4-year-old who's coming to therapy. So a whole range. That includes people who are maybe born with various different conditions like cerebral palsy or like, difficulties producing speech sounds, autism, other, what we might call other developmental language disorders, things that begin in children. And many of those things often being things that will continue to adulthood. And so we're also talking about helping folks live with these things. And then we're also working with folks who have maybe lived their entire lives, feeling that they can communicate, eat, drink, think, what have you, in a way that is typical, and then have an injury, have an illness, a disease process, something like that come into play that now fundamentally changes their life and their functioning. So we're there in those worlds too. We absolutely see folks from different cultures and different experiences. So there is certainly no one set idea of what our clients, the people we work with, look like. We're also working with families, or even if we're talking about adults, like that might mean that we're working with like friends or significant others or things like that, that this is always a team. Yes, there is a lot of times I say the client, some people might say patient. If you're in the school, maybe you say like student. But the people that we work with are also coming with their support network and they're people who care about them. And we're seeing them maybe for, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short time out of an entire week. Their families are with them all the time. So really thinking much more broadly than that. Other professionals, We work alongside occupational therapists, physical therapists, social work. We work, honestly, even in our on-campus clinic, we do a lot of that interprofessional education, but also, of course, in a medical setting, then there's going to be, doctors, nurses, in addition to that. I've worked with recreational therapists. In a school, you have teachers to collaborate with, and again, so many more. Counselors, psychologists, potentially. And then beyond that, we also help the public because there's also this whole world of, yes, we are helping these people, we're helping the people who are around, maybe surrounding our clients, but also trying to help the world to have more awareness about folks who have difficulties with communication, or even, differences in how they communicate or how they eat, how they drink, and things like that, so that the world also understands better. So that is a major kind of forward public facing aspect of our role too. Like I said, I didn't want to just have our videos only reflect kids potentially, at the risk that that potentially sells short the message that we're sharing about how the field is so wide. So I will also share this one, and this is related to swallowing therapy in a hospital setting.
There are very few people who will say eating's not important to them. Cooking and eating is like probably my favorite thing to do. If I was sitting in a hospital room at 7:30 a.m. and somebody comes and knocks on my door and wants to watch me eat breakfast, I would probably be kind of irritated. So I go in, I'm like super smiley. I say, "Hi, my name is Faith. I'm a speech and swallowing therapist." And when you're in the hospital, you're already in a situation that you don't want to be in. You don't feel good, you're getting poked and prodded all the time. These situations can be very intense. It's like night and day. They lose a lot of their independence. For me, one of the things I love most about speech therapy, specifically working with people with swallowing disorders, is that so many things have to be in order for your swallow to work. The slightest thing can kind of throw it all off. The research is constantly changing. There are these new methods to try. There's like an investigative piece towards it. And you have to be a person who's interested in details. You have to be a people person, I think. You have to enjoy working with your coworkers and with patients and other disciplines. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, and I like all of them. To me, the anatomy and physiology piece is what really gets me, and investigating. And then I love when you see somebody at bedside and you're giving them things to eat and drink, and you're seeing these things, and you're like, does that mean what I think it means? I don't really know. And then, if appropriate, you can actually figure out, by doing an instrumental assessment, what I saw at bedside and what I thought was happening, was it actually happening? The exciting thing is that we have the opportunity to make sure that people are able to eat and drink safely, or give them strategies to help them, whereas if we weren't in the hospital, either nobody would be doing it, or there wouldn't be somebody skilled and specialized who has the education and training to be able to make it happen.
And these videos come from the same folks. I know when I press forward, it's gonna restart the video again for a second and then go beyond that. But just to say too, I know eating and swallowing for a lot of folks is a surprise, is something to even think about. There's so many folks who might struggle with feeding and swallowing, but even in this world where we're talking about adults, statistics show that most people who experience a stroke will have some amount of feeding and swallowing difficulties. So just to speak to the scope of how many people that this affects, that this is not like a one-off or every once in a while you have somebody with these concerns. It's incredibly common. It's the norm. So I know our video kind of touched on this as well, but what are the skills and characteristics that make for a really fantastic speech language pathologist? I would say critical thinking. Our job is different day to day, moment to moment. Even if you're working with one single client consistently, their needs are always evolving. Their level of ability, external factors and things in their life are always evolving. So there's no cookie cutter approach to therapy. It really is like figuring out what works for each individual person at each time and modifying things in real time based on what's going well, what could be going better. We need effective communication. I think being open, being able to be transparent, being able to convey our ideas and help folks to better understand some of these conditions that they might not readily be understanding, might be new, having to help somebody adjust to a new normal potentially after they've acquired a condition. Being able to yes, think about things like documentation, monitoring progress. So all of those things. And we're fundamentally, we're working with people, which also brings in the compassion, having empathy, coming into a space and not being judgmental about a person's circumstances and not even about their communication or their feeding and swallowing, that we're there to help and support them and guide them. But that is going to be coming from as understanding of a place that we can, recognizing that I don't have the same experiences as my client. They've lived through something different from what I live with. And right along with that is listening, that we need to be able to really hear, understand, get the most from our clients, family members, other professionals, that we are not just like, oh, I am the expert and you all will just do what I say that you do. But that we have some expertise in technical knowledge, but the person who's living with that communication difficulty or disorder, they are the experts on that experience. So the family is the expert on their child's experience. So we're bringing all of that together. So I think those are a subset of things to consider. Plus, mentioning that the field is always changing. You have to keep up with new research, new education, all of that. What is a job outlook for speech language pathologists? In short, there's a very, very, very high need. So trust me, people need speech language therapists. That is true whether we're looking at medical settings. We have more and more, a larger and larger aging population. And so that creates a huge world for speech language therapists to work with older adults, especially maybe in some of those more medical facilities and things like that, to provide that support there. Even in a place like the schools where that might seem so obvious that, oh yes, speech language therapists in the schools can tell you very plainly, I mean, a lot of places, but if we're just talking Florida specifically, there's a critical shortage of speech language therapists in the schools, speech language pathologists in the schools. They need more people. So there is such a gigantic demand in that world, to kind of say in short. So with that, great. So now you've learned about, here's what speech language pathology is. Maybe you're intrigued. How do you become a speech language pathologist? What is this all about then? So to work as a speech language pathologist at the entry level, one needs a master's degree, Master of Arts, Master of Science, either way, to work independently as a speech language pathologist. There are folks who work as speech language pathology assistants with a bachelor's degree, so there are some other pathways, but really the entry level speech language pathologist is a master's degree. That often looks like 2 years of full-time study. There are some programs across the US that offer part-time options, and those might be more like 3 years or so to complete. But for full-time, which is what we offer presently, it's 2 years, 6 semesters for reference, and that's pretty standard, I'd say about. while somebody's in school, they're going to be taking academic courses, but they're also going to have clinical experiences. It's not all going to be, sitting down, listening to a lecture, learning from a textbook. It's real, it's hands-on. We're packing a lot in those 2 years, safe to say. And for those who might be interested, and I realize some of you might be thinking, well, my undergraduate major right now is not in communication sciences and disorders, is not in speech language pathology. So where does that leave them? There are absolutely options for folks who earned an undergraduate degree in a different major to then make their way into a graduate program for speech language pathology, just by taking prerequisite courses. Different programs do that different ways. I'll talk a little bit about how we do it. Some programs do it by offering like a bridge program where you just take the prerequisites and you're applying to graduate programs from there. But we have so many fantastic people who, as we say for us, like come to us from out of field, other degrees. With that, so what is it that we're offering? What do things look like here? So we're the UCF School of Communication Sciences and Disorders, our master's program, it's an MA. We are part of CHIPS, the College of Health Professions and Sciences. So we could see the health sciences building here. It's where a lot of our classes are and all of that, not all of them, certainly. But that's kind of our, at least on campus, hub. With that, so what is our actual program like? Firstly, I have these, happy faces of folks who graduated from grad school. They did it, they made it, they survived it, they did the 2 years. So just to know how very doable that is. We love celebrating those folks. So we are, of course, educating and training future speech language pathologists. As I noted, it is a full-time program, approximately 2 years. It's six semesters in length. That includes summers. You're really, in it when you are in this program. We offer a couple different tracks. We offer an accelerated track, which might not necessarily make sense for some of you all because it's particularly for folks who are undergrad students in our communication sciences and disorders major. And if that's the case, then there's an application, there's a process where some, select folks can take some graduate level courses in their last semester of their undergraduate degree. But I mentioned we also have out of field tracks. So how we do things is that folks can apply to our graduate program who have a bachelor's degree in something else, not speech language therapy, not communication sciences and disorders. They go through our application and interview, everything process. And for those who are accepted, then they are accepted into that graduate program. They have a spot, but they'll take prerequisite courses here at UCF. Usually that takes about 2 semesters or so. So it works out to be a little longer, but you get those prerequisite courses to set us up to be really positive in grad. But it also, again, you've got your spot. You are actually accepted in the grad program, providing all things go well. And we have some special certificate options with autism spectrum disorders, working with folks who have autism or are autistic, certificates in language and literacy. We do a lot of collaboration as well with education. And for us, at least presently, we admit 2 cohorts a year with aiming for approximately 45 students per cohort. So meaning like this group of folks that you could see who graduated all together, that they were accepted to the program at the same time. They took most of their classes all with each other, with the exception of a couple of electives. And so you really have your core group that you're moving through this with. Mrs. Hasegawa will talk momentarily about admissions, but we admit in both fall and spring. And just to highlight a little bit real quickly, of course, we have our clinic. That's in Research Park, so it's actually not directly on campus. It's not within the health sciences building. Sometimes that confuses people. Had a couple people who come up here and want to like here because I'm on campus right now, who want to explore the clinic, and we're like, oh, actually, it's over here. Um, but only, 5-10 minutes off campus. We see a range of clients, so even though that's kind of our university clinic setting, we have a lot of variety within there, including some really unique opportunities. Specifically, we have the Aphasia House, which is an intensive, comprehensive aphasia program. There's only a handful of intensive, comprehensive aphasia programs for folks who struggle with language in particular after a stroke, usually. There's only a handful of those intensive comprehensive programs throughout the country. And we know that that is like the gold standard of therapy for folks. We have an audiology center. This has been talking a lot about speech language pathology, but audiology is also, key to our field. And so we have so many great collaborations there. We have our FAST Center, which is a license for assistive technology and services. Specifically for us in Orlando, we kind of cover the surrounding area for us. So meaning that just like we see in this video, we have all kinds of devices to help people communicate, all kinds of technology and things to help people communicate or just adapt in their everyday life. And so we're really fantastic in that area. We've got iRead, an intensive language and literacy program. We actually have multiple branches of that now where we have camps and all kinds of, cool, intensive opportunities. And we've got programs like Speak Up as well, where working with folks who are students here at UCF and might have various different developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, what have you, and really helping to support those people and with an especially strong mindset towards like advocacy and, empowerment and things like that. And just to note as well, we have some additional exciting opportunities. We now, within the last few years, have our Innovation Center. That's also over in Research Park. It's attached to our clinic. And so we have access to really fantastic technology. We have a hologram machine. We have in the picture below, we could see we have like a simulation center where we can make our, clinic rooms or our Innovation Center rooms look more like a story or more like a library and kind of bring people into the real world more so than we could otherwise. Students are absolutely seeing clients outside of the clinic as well. We've got external rotations. For folks who are looking for research opportunities, there's so many. A thesis is optional for our program. And even if a thesis is not necessarily the right thing for you, we have some amazing, faculty who work in research who are always looking for assistance, collaboration. We're engaging with the community. We put on events for the community for education, for awareness. And again, the fact that we're really working alongside other folks, we probably do, I would say, like the most of that with physical therapy, but social work and more areas all the time as well, just within UCF. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Hasagawa. She's going to talk about some additional topics. So, all right. Christy, you got to unmute. Sorry. That's okay.
There we go. Okay. So we talked a lot about the program and hopefully some of you are interested. And so you want to hear now, like, how do you pay for all of this? So unfortunately, grad school is expensive. One of the ways that a lot of students will pay for their graduate education is through student loans. So just like in undergrad, if you completed a FAFSA to be considered for any federal financial aid, that is something that you would need to do again. in graduate school. We also have some scholarships available, so that's something that you can certainly apply for after you've been admitted into our program. We have graduate students as well as undergraduate students in our program receive scholarships specific to our department all the time, and they're great opportunities to get extra funding to help you pay for school. Another thing that's really popular among our students is we have some limited graduate teaching assistantships. This allows you to work with our faculty. It could be in the classroom, it could be helping them with their research in their labs. It depends on the situation, but this is a great way to help you get some extra money. You get paid to help support that faculty member, like I said, either in their classroom or in the research lab. And then there's also some grant funded projects. We talked about these certificates that are available. So Project ASD is a great option. They do recruit upon admission. So once you're admitted, you can be considered for Project ASD. And there is a service commitment after graduation if you're eligible for this program. There's also Project Speech. If you're interested more so in the language and literacy side of things, you could look into this. This is something that they recruit students while you're already in the program. So if you're interested in either of those grant funded projects, we can certainly direct you to their email address to get more information. And they also have websites where there's a lot of great information as well. Do the next slide. All right, so the application process, currently our application is open for spring 2026 and fall 2026. So if you are graduating sometime within the next few months or within the next year and a half or so, you could definitely submit an application. Our deadlines are listed here. So if you're looking to start in a fall semester, you have to submit your application by January 15th. If you're wanting to start in a spring semester, it's always October 1st. Okay, there are 2 steps to our application process. So you do have to have both of those steps completed prior to those application deadlines. So the first step is completing the UCF application. That's through the College of Graduate Studies. They have an application that you basically just fill out your contact information and pay a $30 application fee. Your decision comes from UCF, so that's why you have to submit your application with us. You also need to apply on CIDCAS. It's CSD-CAS. It's a centralized application system that we use, similar to a Common App, if you're familiar with that from undergrad. And that is where you actually apply and submit all of your application materials. There's a lot of materials that you have to submit there. Letters of recommendation, you require a resume, your official transcripts are sent there. So you don't need to send any materials to UCF, but you do need to send everything to CIDCAS. Even as a UCF student, you still have to submit your transcript directly to CIDCAS prior to the application deadline. If you did dual enrollment when you were in high school, we need that official transcript as well, any transient work, things like that. There's also some supplemental questions that are on CIDCAS where we ask you specific questions about yourself. You can share information about yourself as well. We do not require that you take or submit GRE scores. That's not a part of our application review process. But if you have questions, we're happy to answer questions about the application process. When we actually, you can go to that slide, we have an information session coming up next week. So if you are thinking about applying anytime soon, we can go into a lot more detail on the specific components of the application. We'll have our clinic director in attendance as well at that meeting. And so you're able to use the QR code here if you're interested in registering. It'll be a Zoom meeting just like this. So we're happy to share a lot more details at that time about our specific UCF program. That's it for me.
Perfect. I think hopefully I think we're good on time in terms of the outline. So yeah, thank you all so much. If you have any questions, definitely happy to chat through anything. Don't feel like I've seen things in the chat, but
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Hello. I'd like to go back to one of the slides based on
Hmm.
your, I think it was your innovation clinic.
Yes, the Innovation Center.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, sorry.
In terms of, yeah, yeah. In terms of
Mhm.
like the research opportunities, where can I go and find the people that would like for me to be their assistants? So,
Yeah, it's a great question. My biggest recommendation is a couple different things. If folks, I wonder, Christy, if you can even like put the link in the chat for our like CSD school like website or even just specifically the research labs page. But for our school of CSD, I say the main place I recommend we have a page on our website for research labs within our department. And so that shows folks who are, I would say, like most actively working right now. So yeah, the link that's in there now. And so that's a great way to look. The alternative too is I recommend looking at our directory at faculty and looking at different faculty interests. For all of our faculty, we list areas of interest or specialty. The reason why I mentioned the research lab spot as a good place to look first is because there are faculty like me, for instance, where I don't do research, although by all means, if somebody wanted to um, come in and like ask me about research, I could definitely direct them somewhere else. So looking at those research labs and what opportunities are there, most of them have contact information. That's your best bet, or going through faculty. No need to be intimidated. They love help. They want help. So that's my recommendation. Does that help?
yes, it does. Thank you so much.
No problem. I did see a question about providing opportunity for state certification and licensing, and our program absolutely does prepare folks for Florida licensing and speech language pathology through the Department of Health. Of course, there can be differences sometimes in terms of if you're looking at working out of state. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything additional, but
Mhm. I think that's it. We have like a lot of web courses where we'll share resources and information to help prepare you for that.
mhm. Yeah, and for Jessica, I think I maybe want to clarify so that a couple different things. When we at least say that we have graduate teaching assistants, that's talking about paid positions where folks are assisting our faculty as teachers, where usually there are 10-hour-a-week commitments, folks are grading, what have you, like your general idea of like a TA, a GTA. Um, what you're referencing in terms of the consortium check. So I did not mention this for folks. But without belaboring it, we have had a consortium track for years, which was designed for folks who are working full time in the schools. On become as a speech language therapist, and then it's a longer part-time program, but that has been paused for the last few years as we're revising it. So that's why I didn't mention it. We're revising, we want to make it, better, stronger. But there's no exact timeline on that. So I do want to acknowledge that if folks are looking for opportunities to like work significantly while they're a student, to work like full time somewhere or things like that. Right now, we don't have a pathway that folks can apply to for that. Again, we're working on it, but there are other programs even in the state, like Florida State University, FSU, that do have part-time programs.
We did have
Uh,
another question from somebody asking, when do students pick their specialty?
Ooh, that's a good question. So in this world, we really don't necessarily have folks pick their specialties, and we could always, I think, maybe go through this a little bit more like in our info session. So what we train folks to be in this 2-year program is to be a generalist. You're going to get experience in all the things that I listed. And that's required. And again, that's standard for any graduate program. Um, And then you certainly might find in that time things that you gravitate towards. There are a few electives that folks take, so that can give some people the opportunity to burrow in a little bit on different topics if that's of interest. But for our field, a lot of that specialization, I would say, comes after graduation, to just have a little bit of a sense of things. But we make sure you get the full scope while you're here. I know somebody's mentioning difficulty receiving letters of recommendation from professors as a transient student. Um, it's a great question. My suggestion, I mean, I think finding those connections with people, and those could be, maybe faculty who you've had that you haven't even had touch with for a bit. Maybe there's somebody at UCF, you maybe look through our directory, you see somebody who's doing something that's interesting you, and you could talk to them about those areas, where I think, even my experience, at least, like as a former student here, and somebody who was like very intimidated by the process of requesting letters of recommendation, but really trying to like carve out that time, even if you're late to the party, that you've like are carving out that time to maybe now reach out to those instructors, faculty on the back end. There may be some volunteer opportunities that are closer to home. I don't know of like research or volunteer opportunities specifically with our faculty that are closer to that area, but there's no rule that the letters of recommendation need to be from our faculty. They can be from outside faculty, if hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay. Anything else? Great questions.
I guess for students who aren't from the traditional communication sciences bachelor's degree, do you have any recommendations for them if they're trying to find new experiences or trying to get into figuring out if this is truly for them?
Yeah, that's excellent. I would say, if you have the opportunity to look at things like shadowing, and I would say in my experience helping students, the most amenable places to doing that are often the schools, and then followed in some cases by private practices. And so potentially like reaching out to those folks. I think also if you want to reach out like to me after, we have a student organization, National Student Speech Language Hearing Association, and they do a lot of volunteer opportunities in the community. So like folks who are either part of that group, which you don't have to be a like CSD major to be part of that group, that really plugs folks in. And then we've definitely talked about where I'm always happy to talk to some of our folks who are more plugged in with the community in terms of like if they have suggestions about specific schools or places to look out to where folks are willing and interested in having folks. I promise, as somebody who talks to the schools quite a bit, they would love for all of you to be there all the time. They want as many of you as you can possibly get to show up. So yeah, I think finding those opportunities is great. Yeah, being part of those kind of student orgs, that's possible. Doing some research on your own. But yeah, those are probably the big things I think, and are great for our students too, in terms of like seeing what this really is.
Thank you. And then we also had a follow-up question from that transient student. They were asking, is it not required for two of the letters to be from professors? Could they still have a competitive application if they'd have one or no letters from any professors?
It is recommended that two letters be from faculty. It's not required, and you might have like fantastic letters of recommendation from, non-faculty folks. And I'm sure, Ms. Hasagawa can expand too. But I think the one thing, as somebody who had this conversation with somebody like 2 days ago, the one thing I would consider is that even though This is a program that is building folks towards a profession, towards speech language pathology. It also is an academic program. And so for us, there is value in having those academic references because we do want people who can speak to your ability to be successful in a program, and speaking to all of those things, study skills or time management or engagement and what have you. So I really would strongly encourage. Um, I would worry. I feel like unofficially, I would worry to have no letters from faculty. I don't know, Christy, if you want to add.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say as well. And sometimes people get letters from like supervisors, but if you're not working in like an education related realm, then it's kind of hard. It's not going to be as strong of a letter as someone who can speak to, your ability to be a good student. So that's kind of our best insight into how you'll be as a graduate student. So I think those academic letters are typically more helpful.
Somebody asking during time at Advent Health. That's awesome. Got to observe speech therapy, feeding therapy. It was very intriguing. Each of the speech language pathologists were bilingual, including English, Spanish, and ASL. Is bilingual a requirement to the field? It's not, but it's amazing if you are. So we have a huge need because just like you're alluding to, I mean, the world is diverse, and this is me speaking quite frankly as like a monolingual English speaker who took Spanish in high school and took ASL1 while I was an undergrad here. But yeah, I think those skills are amazing, especially say for American Sign Language. If you're working with, in particular, like a deaf and hard of hearing population, I think that at least the feedback that I've heard from folks who are deaf and hard of hearing is that that is a massive asset when you're really working with those people. And absolutely, like speaking Spanish or speaking any other language is huge. Plus, we even in our program we have coursework that is about working with folks from different populations, different cultures, because regardless of which languages you speak or which languages you don't speak, that's still incredibly important to be um, to be aware of how best to facilitate therapy for somebody. There's a lot that is like knowing the language is one thing, and then there's all kinds of skills that go into it. And to the follow-up question, no, there is not additional licensing at this time to be a bilingual SLP. There's no exam, there's no what have you. It is, as of now, truly just going by self-report, for better, for worse. I feel like every now and then there's mumblings of whether it would make sense to modify that, but no additional licensing. Other questions, if any?
I have one more question
Sure.
pertaining to my major. Like I'm majoring in psychology right now on like the clinical track. Do I need to take a lot of prerequisites to be in the master's program, or is it still kind of in the same area?
Yeah, it's the same either way. So we have a set prerequisites that are like specifically within our major. There are some general common prerequisites that folks need as well, which you've likely done. So, and I think maybe talk about this more in like our info sessions, are hard to say, but can always dig into more, where folks do need to have taken a biological science, a social science, a physics or chemistry course, and a statistics course. And then beyond that, it's about, I think when I was counting the last, like 8 or so undergraduate courses that we offer as prerequisites, and they're specifically like speech language therapy courses. They're essentially a subset of what our undergraduate students take. So, but yeah, so regardless of where somebody's coming from, outside of maybe if you've knocked out some of those like gen ed, more common prerequisites, yeah, it shouldn't change anything dramatically in terms of where your program is. Once in a while, somebody has like taken a class that can count towards those prereqs because they did it as an elective or something like that. So sometimes that happens, but no, doesn't dramatically change anything.
Okay, thank you.
Such great questions. Anything else?
All right, well, if there are no more questions, students, Jacqueline is going to drop an email in the chat if you all would like to, if you have any further questions for her, anything. And thank you so much, Jacqueline and Christy, for coming here today and giving this presentation. We really appreciate it. It is so helpful. And students, if you could fill out the survey, that would be helpful to us as well. Thank you again.
Yeah, and thank you all. This has been great, really excellent, thoughtful questions, and feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks
Have a good day.
everybody.